About 8 months ago or so, I started to feel like my progression in this hobby that I love so much was starting to get a little stifled. And no matter how many miniatures I painted, when put side by side, I did not see a clear progression in my skill level. I seemed to have stalled out a bit. So instead of continuing down the same path, which was providing more and more frustration in a hobby that should be calming and enjoyable, I decided to use some of my resources to create what I consider to be the best miniature painting exercises that you could do, our sparring mat, if you will, of miniature painting, where you can practice techniques in a very controlled, repeatable way that should only take about 15 minutes from beginning to end and leave you with a really clear snapshot of where you are in your progression for that individual skill. And I am really excited to share these training exercises for these techniques with you today. Welcome back to Emberforge Lodge, a place where we can get together and talk about all aspects of this hobby, from miniature painting to basing, terrain building, and techniques and strategies, and that's kind of what we're going to go over today. I'm really excited to show you some training exercises that I've used to help my own progression in this hobby. We're going to start with non-metallic metal. One of the biggest roadblocks for me with non-metallic metal was painting the metal pieces on a model, but then painting the rest of the model. So I'm not really honing my skill. I'm completing one part of it and then moving on. And I might spend extra time with each miniature, but this wasn't training. This was me showing up on game day without having put the time in to train these skills beforehand. And it's very difficult to learn a new skill or refine the skills you already have if you're only using them here and there with very specific things instead of coming back to a very repeatable process. So if you're just starting out, you might not have a ton of miniatures, and this will be perfect for you. Or if you are an experienced painter that's just trying to find a new way to train a technique, you don't even need any miniatures for this. I bought these sandwich swords off Amazon for $7 for a pack of 100. And they are perfect to train non-metallic metal. They are a little bigger than any swords that we're going to paint on a miniature, but that extra size just adds a little bit of cushion to the process of learning how to paint non-metallic metal. And the best part is, once they're primed, they function like any sword or any piece of metal that you're going to paint on a miniature. So let's paint up two of these swords really quick. The first one I want to paint is in a turquoise color, and the second one will be gold. In both cases, we are going to break down the non-metallic metal process into its simplest parts so that we can repeat these going forward. Let's look at the teal sword first. I'm going to start with the darkest color being Prussian blue. I really like that blue. It's really deep with a nice little green tint to it. And we're going to play around with this a little bit with some chromatic shading to see if we can get a really rich black for the darkest parts of the shadow on this sword. One step up from that will be tropical turquoise from Green Stuff World. Our highlight color is going to be mint twister. Now, I also will have Pro Acryl's bold titanium white with us to push that highlight even further, but that's really going to be for spectral highlights and not necessarily what I would consider to be our highlight color. So let's start off with mint twister. We're going to start with that nice mint highlight color. We're going to apply that to the sword in the areas we would like to have the most reflection coming off of the sword, and that will help us figure out how we shade on either side of it. Now, nothing is set in stone, and you can move this highlight color as you paint. You'll see that happen over the course of even painting this sword. But let's get that mint twister set up at the very tip of the sword on one side, on the other side about halfway down the sword, and then go back to that first side and throw another highlight in there. That'll be an excellent base for the highlights, and now we can start bringing that color down a little bit by using some of the mid-tone, the turquoise, at the end of wherever our highlight was placed. The next progression down is Prussian blue, which will finish out our progression down into the black surface of the primer. And at this point, it will all still look a little blocky. That's fine. We're going to start mixing these paints together, and it's super easy to do if you haven't done any mixing before. The ratio really is going to be 50-50. So take a little bit of that mint twister, mix it with a little bit of the turquoise, and try to apply that roughly where your mid-tone meets your highlight. Non-metallic metal is a back and forth process. So applying this mix might overlap onto your highlight, and you'll go back in with your highlight, apply it again, and draw that back into your mid-tone. This is just a back and forth process, and as you go, you may notice it looking uglier and uglier until the moment it doesn't. Something will just click, and suddenly it's metal. It goes from a plastic sword with splattered pigment on it to having a reflective sheen. So to demonstrate something unique when it comes to shading, I'm gonna add a little bit of burnt sienna to the Prussian blue. This will create a really rich blackish green instead of using a normal desaturated black. When applied to one side of the sword, you can definitely see the difference, and this creates a lot more visual interest in the color as it progresses from the highlight to the shadow. So take your time, go back and forth with the shadow, the midtone, and the highlight, and push your skills as far as you can with this painting process. Okay, so the teal sword is looking good. Let's take a look at the gold sword. We're gonna start by laying down a little bit of a base coat for this of dark rust, moving up to orange brown, then golden yellow. Lastly, we're gonna apply ice yellow, but the ice yellow is just like we did with the white for the spectral highlights when it came to the teal sword. This is gonna be used very sparingly. It can overwhelm and make the gold look out of place if it's applied too liberally. So with the gold sword, let's start with that golden yellow to add those highlights where we ultimately want our biggest reflections to be. Moving down from there, we're gonna add in some of that orange brown to smooth that reflection into the deepest tones, and then finish with the dark rust. But there is a really cool aspect to gold that I want to show you, which is adding a little burgundy to your highlight and your midtone to create your shadow. Makes the gold feel far more alive and rich and is far more visually interesting if you apply that into the shadows. So a little behind the scenes, each one of these swords took me approximately 15 minutes to paint. That's not long at all. And they serve now as a great little snapshot in my progression in non-metallic metal. All I'm gonna do is write a number on the back of them so I know what sequence they belong in. And now when I get to maybe my 20th sword, I can look back to this 5th one and see the progression in my non-metallic metal skill set. So now that we have a repeatable, controlled exercise for non-metallic metal, let's talk about brush control and painting with intention. Once a month, I meet with a group of friends and we'll have a topic for that month for miniature painting. We'll get together and talk about what we painted and our journey and what we liked and didn't like about that topic. Last month, our topic was to emulate the style of another artist to kind of get us out of our comfort zone and try something new. I decided to emulate the style of Frank Miller from his Sin City graphic novels. I always thought that this was such a stylized and unique idea to only use black and white to tell the entire story, and I was really excited to translate that into a 3D model. I didn't even know if that was possible, but I was going to give it a try. I honestly went into this thinking it was just going to be a really fun and unique painting session, not realizing it was going to shine a light on just how unsteady and unintentional each one of my brush strokes was. The issue is, when painting a traditional model, you do have the flexibility to be a little wavy with your brush stroke and maybe not be as on target, because a lot of the times we are doing light and shadow gradients, and that does not always need a very sharp line. It can be a little wavy and there can be a little hesitation in your brush stroke, and it will not show in the overall appearance of the model. This experience was incredibly different because we're only using 2 colors for the entire model. Every brush stroke mattered, and every wave in my hand or hesitation mid brush stroke was very noticeable. I had to go back over this multiple times, reapplying the black primer just to make the same brush stroke and the same mistake again. This helped me in 2 ways. I was able to see that I needed to start working on actual hand control of the brush, and I looked at multiple exercises and massages that I could do to my hand throughout the day to make it more steady when I was going to paint later that afternoon. Additionally, it helped me figure out that visually and mentally, I needed to start painting with far more intention. I needed to put the brush on the model and move it in such a way that had no hesitation. And learning that has helped me so much with miniatures that I've painted since this one. In the example that we did here, we just did black and white because I was trying to emulate the Sin City style. I'll put some pictures up of the finished one I did for that monthly challenge, but you can do this with any 2 paints. Just be aware of the fact you are not going to be doing any shading. It is just one color over another color. Have some fun with it, but really pay attention to how you're using that brush, how comfortable you feel, and if there is any shakiness in your hand, spend some time massaging the muscles in your hand a little bit before you paint. Try not to have caffeine around the time that you're going to be painting. If you're over 21, I have heard that having a beer either before or kind of during your painting session can help with a little bit of hand tremors. I haven't tried that personally, but it is something I came across while I was researching how to have a steadier hand while painting. I personally bought some products that are usually reserved for more physical therapy for hand movements, and I just train with them throughout the day, and I find that my hand is far more steady when I go to paint later. All right, so you have an exercise you can try for non-metallic metal, and you're starting to paint with a little bit more brush control. Now let's talk about expanding our use of color by mixing it and limiting our palette. So not long ago, my company hosted an Extra Life charity event and asked me if I would hold a miniature painting tutorial for new painters who might want to get into the hobby. Of course I accepted, and it was a lot of fun, but there was one question from one of my friends that I did not expect, and it kind of stuck with me when he asked if I had any black paint so he can add a shadow to the miniature that he was painting. And I realized I didn't, and I didn't even think to bring black paint because I haven't used it in about a year other than just priming miniatures. And it kind of dawned on me as I was explaining to him how important it is to learn how to mix your paints properly to get better, more vibrant chromatic shadows rather than just adding black or white to a paint. So let's dive into some advanced mixing techniques. What I want you to do is pick 3 midtones for any model that you have. So look at the model, look at the components, figure out what colors you would like them to be, and just pick 3 midtones. Next, I want you to pick more of a darker tone. That will kind of be your shadow color, but you can use it at any point to bring those midtones down. The only rule is you are not allowed to pick black paint. You can pick any other paint. And this is kind of where understanding what paints mixed together will create what darker shades comes in handy, but the only way to truly know that is to experiment. I'm going to give you an example of that Prussian blue we used earlier mixed with the burnt sienna creates a really deep, dark, greenish color that is imperceptible to black unless it's held up against black. So on a mini with a whole bunch of other colors, it will read to the eye as shadow, but it will make sense as a shade for the Prussian blue or as a shade for more of a green. That is just one example though, so feel free to just pick a darker color that you're going to use to bring those mid-tones down a bit into the recesses and the shadows. Next, pick a highlight color. The highlight color should elevate those midtones, but it should not be a complement to them. Meaning, if one of your midtones is a green, don't pick a brighter green, maybe pick a yellow. Mixing yellow into a green will boost its vibrancy in a really awesome way that reads like light reflecting off of a green surface, but it's not turning it into a light green, it is turning it into a very rich and natural green. As another example, I love mixing into my reds a fluorescent orange that boosts that vibrancy, and it makes it so much more visually interesting, and all of the folds of the fabric that don't read as orange, they read as a very bright red. But the best way to figure out how to do this is to practice. So just pick those 3 midtones, a shade tone, and a highlight, and paint that miniature to the best of your ability. And keep in mind, this should never be a punishing experience, where halfway through the painting process, you hate the specific shade color you picked, but you're gonna stick it out because you started with it. If it's not working, it's not working, and change it up. So don't feel that you're trapped by these decisions. Just pick these as a base and get started. And if you have to swap out a highlight or swap out a shade, go for it. Try to keep the midtones the same though, because that's kind of, your static environment, but you can swap out those shades and highlights. Here's the one caveat: don't swap it out just because you want another color. Swap it out if it's not working, but keep it if it's working, even if you don't like it, because over time, as you have more experience with the mixing process and working with these chromatic highlights and shadows, your brain is going to start building a catalog and a library of what works the best together and what didn't work so well. And that's going to help you so much in the long run. For me personally, I first fell in love with the idea of chromatic shading and highlighting when using green mixed with a vibrant yellow. Seeing that bump in saturation and seeing the vibrancy of this paint come to life in front of me was such a rewarding and fun experience. It pushed me to want to just see what other color combinations I could make that would boost vibrancy in my midtones. You are going to come across some paints that will not function the way you expect them to mix together, and you'll find that some paints will just create a muddy gray brown. You just don't use those again unless you're looking for a muddy gray brown look. But once you find those color combinations that you like the most, you will find yourself going back to them often, and you'll be able to open up that mental library and pick the exact colors that you need for the look you're going for. The one thing that I always felt slowed me down when trying to progress in this hobby was how infrequently some of the techniques I was trying to learn were actually achievable on the model. So even if there was a model with a lot of non-metallic metal on it, I didn't feel like I was ever progressing because it would either take me way too long or I didn't do it as frequently as I would like. And creating this training environment for myself that is still pretty quick so I can sit down and maybe start my painting session by painting a quick non-metallic metal sword just to kind of shake the dust off and get ready to paint has been exponentially helpful in my growth as a miniature painter, and I hope it is for you as well. Learning to paint with intention will help you for the rest of your miniature painting career. These training exercises won't ever really go away. They just build on themselves. The non-metallic metal swords that we're painting in those little 15-minute exercises are also exercises in glazing. Mixing the paints and finding out what color combinations you like best for light and shadow is also how to shade a model and how to apply those highlights and where they should be applied. Learning to paint with intention will help you in all stages of your miniature painting journey, and learning how to mix those colors and which ones you like the most mixed together for your highlights and your shadows will always come in handy with all of the miniatures you paint in your miniature painting career. I had so much fun hanging out with you today, and if this video helped you in any way with either the training exercises or going over a little bit of the color theory and how to experiment with it going forward, please let me know by dropping it down in the comments. If you like what we do here and you want to see more videos like this, the squirrels tell me that subscribing and liking is the best way to help the channel, and they also send their heartfelt thanks if you do. I really had a great time hanging out with you today, and I look forward to seeing you again at Emberforge Lodge.